Hello, and welcome to the H plus H Connect, the podcast series that brings you insights and inspirations to enhance your creativity and overall business. I am your host, Darren Stern, the show director for H plus H Americas and the vice president at Columbus Inc., based in Chicago. I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with all of you. I'm excited to share a special recording of the H plus H America's Day 2 keynote session with Kemp Gerstel, a passionate creator and influencer who has made significant strides in the creative community. Amber will share her expertise and her insights on influencer marketing and on its impact on her career and business. But first, let's hear directly from Amber, who has an engaging story to tell you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I feel like she told you everything, so it's been great being here. Thank you so much, and I will. Yes, my name is Kemp Gerstel, and I am excited to be here today. And last night I came to the fashion show, and I was done with my slide that I was going to share with you today, but I had to add just one more because I watched the fashion show, and I'm watching all of these beautiful pieces of art just come down the runway, and I'm looking at them, and I'm a crafter, I'm a maker. I know just enough to be dangerous, and I'm looking at, there was a sweater, a shawl. I'm like, I'm gonna make that. I can make that. Somebody else made it. I can make it. And I had, there's like an angel and a devil on your shoulder. Girl, you can. The devil, which is more like a teenager rolling their eyes at me, really, is, honey, you have no time and no business trying to make that sweater. And so immediately, this rolling eyed teenager tells me, do you remember Gordon Gartrell episode of The Cosby Show? Now, does anybody remember the Gordon Gartrell episode of The Cosby Show? Okay. For those of you who do not, let me do you the favor of reminding you this episode. Okay. Theo, the eldest son in the family, sees this designer shirt that he wants, right? And the shirt, I think, was maybe like $200, $300. He can't not buy this shirt. He can't afford this shirt. So Denise, played by Lisa, says, oh, Theo, I can make you the shirt. Don't worry. I'll make you that shirt. It's going to be great. So Denise tries to make the shirt, and this is what Denise makes. The sleeves are all wrong. The buttons are askew. The collar's all wrong. And Denise looks there in this particular scene here. Denise looks at him and is, maybe you just tuck it in. And he looks at her and he goes, it's tucked into my sock. And essentially what this little rolling eyed teenager is saying to me, you are going to make a Gordon Gartrell episode of your own if you attempt this. So I do know my limits, but I do hope today I can bring you a little bit of inspiration through either storytelling or some of the fun facts I'll share about how influencer marketing has impacted my career, how it's impacted my business, and how hopefully it can be relevant in some way to your own story. So before I start, usually when I start these things, I tell you my background, where I'm from, how I did this, and we'll get there. But what I want to start with is the story of how my Instagram got in 2019, right? So salacious. It's like an episode of Scandal. So I'm flying from Miami, where I live, to California, where my family lives. And many of you have traveled a long way to be here, so you understand these flights get very long. And the flight from Miami to California is about 5.5, 6 hours. We're on the flight. I've got myself, my husband, and my 5-year-old child, 5 at the time. And we are flying across the country. Marcus, my son, is sitting. He's entertained. He's watching like a show, probably on his iPad. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to settle in and get some work done. So I bring in my laptop and I'm sitting and I'm working and I'm working. I'm going to tackle these emails. I'm going to get my inbox to 0. Yeah. So I'm working and I don't really even notice this, but as I'm getting through them, I see this email from one Tajir McKees. I don't know Tajir, but we're about to get to be very good friends. Tajir sends me an email and it says Instagram account. Now, prior to this email from him, I'd gotten this alert from what seems to be Instagram asking me to log into my account, and I did. Don't do that. That gave him my Instagram password, let him log in, and he shut down my account. I couldn't get in, couldn't access it. I think when I went in, it was just like blank. Nothing was there. So I'm like freaking out. Then I get an email from Shajir. This says, "Good day." He's very polite, being the hacker that he was. "We apologize for the inconvenience." Do you really, Shajir? "Your account has been temporarily blocked. It's perfectly safe. We haven't touched it." Like he's taking my child. "We're waiting for you to reply. 2 hours. If you do not respond, we will clear your account, delete the photos, and sell your account. We're waiting for your reply." I am freaking out at this point. My husband's next to me. I'm like, what are we supposed to do? I didn't see this initially from him, so he emailed me again. "We apologize for the inconvenience." He's very apologetic for what he has done. "Waiting for an answer for another hour. If not, we're going to clear your account, delete the photos, and sell your account." So from there, we exchange a series of emails about what he wants me to do is send him $350 via Bitcoin. Now, I don't know anything about Bitcoin. I don't know how to get Bitcoin. And let me just give you a little fun fact. You cannot buy Bitcoin while you're flying in a tube in the middle of the sky. That is perhaps the hardest thing you could ever do, because you have to receive a verification email from the Bitcoin people that only is sent via cellular data. It is not sent via Wi-Fi. So I can't even get, because I'm fully engaged, by the way. I'm going to send this man his $350 via Bitcoin. So I can't get the Bitcoin from the air. So I write him back and explain in this very long-winded, long sentence that is very unlike me to write, but I was just frantic in the moment, and tell him that I'm not on cell service. I'm in a plane. I will land. And once I land, I will send you your $350, sir. So he sends me back an email, which could have come straight from Liam Neeson himself. We will wait exactly 2 hours. So we're like off the plane. I hop in my mom's car. I'm like, "Mom, we got to go. We have to get this coin right now." She's like, "Girl, what are you thinking about?" I'm like, "We are being bad." So finally, we get back to my mom's house. This is probably, I think it was like 2:00 in the morning. We're trying to buy this Bitcoin. We buy the Bitcoin. We send it to Chajir. Do you think he released my account? No, he did not. He did no such thing. I have way too much faith in this hacker. And the way it eventually got solved was I just happened to know someone who, Eva Chen, who is the fashion director at Instagram. I sent her an email. She told me, "I got you." She went in. She fixed my account. She then said, "You probably need to get two-factor authentication," which I did. After that, my husband, "You should follow up with Shajir. You don't want to piss him off." So the last correspondence I have with this man is me saying, him asking, "Did you manage to log into your account?" And I said, "Yes. Thank you." You can take, at the very least, get two-factor authentication on your Instagram account. It really taught me what kept happening. I think had someone asked me how I felt about Instagram or how important it was to me, I probably would have said, "It's fine. I'll take it or leave it." And I do still feel that way because it doesn't engulf my life. But it did teach me how important it was to my business because of how I just completely crumbled when it was not accessible to me. And that may be something that you can maybe relate to in your own businesses or in your own careers. So that lesson, along with others that I've had, really taught me that you have to just diversify the way that you're sharing content and the way that you're sharing your content with your audience. So there's going to be your social media. And for me, it looks like social media, which is the Instagram, which is my main platform. We do use TikTok, although that's up in the air. A little bit on Facebook, but Instagram and Meta is the main bulk of. Then there's blog posts, which still exist. And I do think they're having like a resurgence. I think those are becoming more and more relevant. Email, which is huge, right? Having your email list, having someone that you can reach out to, a list that you own. For me, also, there's television and media appearances that I do, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And then also in my business, there's licensing product sales. So having different companies who license with me to create a host of different crafting products. But all of these, if I'm being honest, social media continues to be king for me. Now, this may not be true for everyone, but I do think there's something to take from that because it is such an important channel that has a lot of potential for how you can use it. For me, social media during Q4 is about 75% of what I make in a year. And I know Q4 for all of us is a relevant time because it's Halloween, Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's Hanukkah, it's New Year's. It's the time of the year where people who are not, I always say, it's a time of year where people who are not making and may not have any business making will try to make something. And that is a time where a lot of those dollars come in. Also, I listed the kind of different areas where I make money. And the social media piece for me is managed by an agency. I have an agent and a manager who works in the agency that covers that. And while I am not by any means have a huge following compared to other people out there, I do earn in the top 1% of my agency for social media content. So that lets you know like how important that channel is for me. And I think probably for a lot of us. So now that I've given you a little bit of background on how relevant social media and how being an influencer has been impactful for me, I will now introduce myself properly. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of who I am and how the heck I ended up on this stage talking to you. And by the way, at the end of this, I do hope that we'll have time for questions. And so if you have things that you're thinking as I'm talking, just scribble them down and I'll be glad to. So hi, I'm Amber. As Abby mentioned, I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I was very much not meant to be standing up here on this stage to you today wearing plaid. That was not in the cards. That was not what was planned for me. I grew up in a house where the expectation was you were going to go to school, you're going to get good grades, and then you're going to go to more school, and then you're going to get more good grades, and then you're going to go to as much school as they're going to let you go to and get more good grades, and then you're going to get a job. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to get a job that has some letters behind it. Like you can do an MD, you can be a JD, you can be a PhD, but that's what you're going to do. And that was the expectation. And it was very clear that's what I was going to do. To be fair, I come from a single mom who grew up in Arkansas, literally knows the people who were the Little Rock Nine, and a grandfather who left a very racist South to give his kids a better opportunity in California by opening a store in California so that they didn't have to live in an environment where they were not going to have access to education. So this is where I come from. And so the expectation that I would do better makes sense. But it does also inform the fact that there was no like, oh, you want to be a painter? You want to be an artist? That's cute. You can do that. You can have a hobby. And I did as a kid. The amount of stickers I was collecting was like, what was it, Mr. Grossman stickers? The ones that you bought on the roll? It was like a job. I was going to get those. They were like 25 cents each. I had my hobbies, but that certainly was not going to be a career. At that time, what I do now was not even an option. So that wasn't on anyone's mind. So I went to graduate school to be a child psychologist, and hindsight's always 20/20, right? So looking back, I realized I wanted to be a child psychologist because it was very much a career that allowed me to be creative with children and do fun and creative things through the therapy that I was providing. But during graduate school, I left graduate school and as a psychologist, you have to do an internship. So I did that. And during my internship, I dabbled a little bit more in being creative and how I was sharing my content online. I had a blog at the time, but it was very much a hobby. And around that time, I've graduated, I'm working, I had a baby. And any Hamilton fans in here? I love me some Hamilton, let me tell you what. They say immigrants, they get the job done. Also moms. Moms, they get the job done. That's Hamilton part 2. I was working full time, and then I would come home and I would work on my blog full time. And then I had a son and a husband who also were keeping me busy. So it was 3 full-time jobs, and just like something had to give. I could not do all of those all at the same time. My son, he bless his heart. And from the South, when you say bless your heart, what you really mean? That's when he was little. I remember he went on timeout once. If I'm being honest, he went on timeout and he peed in the timeout chair. Because he was like, you know what? I know how to get out of timeout. I'm going to pee in this chair. And then I do remember he also he had this thing he would do. He would, on timeout, he would get really mad. And I know as a psychologist, you can do whatever you want on timeout. You can yell, you can scream, you're not coming out of timeout. This is the consequence. Get over it. But he would go, yucky poo poo you. And that translated in toddler means F you. A hard time. And I just knew I could not do all of these things at once. So I was working, crafting, and it was like a 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9. That's how it was. And I had this blog. I remember I was doing a lot of card making at the time. And so I was pumping out these cards to be published in magazines. And I was just starting to get to a point where people were reaching out to me to get paid for the content. And I remember this, and as I was working on this presentation, I didn't even remember this, but this is such a full circle moment because I got an email from DMC and you're the show. This is crazy. They offered me to do a long-term contract whereby I would create blog posts using their products in creative and crafty ways. And that was the first time someone had contacted me for anything that was substantial. And it made me think, maybe I could do this for a living. Maybe this actually could work. So I decided to trade in my graduate cap for a handmade party hat. It was very easy to DIY. But I did that and I eventually was able to move. I was working, during the time that I just had started out, I was working at home in our like extra bedroom as a craft room. But I was able to leave there and move into a space that I was able to use as my studio. And this was not the first studio I had. The first place I had was probably the size of from here to there. It was just like a little room I was renting in a house and it had a little desk and I worked out of there and I paid $300 a month, which felt like all the money in the world. And I worked in there and was able eventually to get out of that space and get into a much larger studio. Then I got another, similar to the DMC email, I got another email from Canon, their printer division. And we all know Canon probably our first thought is cameras, but they also have a very robust printer division that does photo printers, office printers. And so they had invited me to be a part of a long-term partnership whereby I would show how to use their printers in really cool ways. And once that came in, I said, you know what, this actually could be a thing because between the DMC money and the Canon money, I was like, I think I might actually be able to make more than I'm making as a psychologist. And fun fact, I wasn't even able to pay off my student loans until I stopped being a psychologist and embarked on career as a content creator. From there, I got really great opportunities and this was like so fun. Does anyone remember a show that was on the Hallmark Channel called Home and Family? Probably not. And that's fine. It's not on the air anymore. So there you go. We figured out why. Nobody was watching it. They did have a show. They did have a competition on that show. It was their DIY star. And I think they're probably Hail Mary trying to save this show to be like, we're going to be like American Idol. And I ended up winning that show, which I think they were like, we know how this can change someone's career. And to be honest, it didn't. But it was a very cool thing. I loved the show. I loved the people on the show. It was so fun to be there. It was filmed on the back lot of Universal. And from the show set, you could look up and see Harry Potter World. So it was a very cool experience. But I won the show. I met great people, producers and directors and people who would later be very impactful for me. I ended up doing like regular segments on the show. They would invite me out and I would do regular crafting segments on that show. And at the same time I was doing Home and Family. Now I know y'all have heard of HSN. If you don't, if you say you have not, I will get off the stage and leave because I know you're lying now. So I became a crafting expert on HSN. And that meant that it was my job to get on there and show you how to make, use these crafting tools. And really my job was to sell it to you. So you would be like, I need it. I have to have it. Send it to me now. And I did that. And those days were tough because HSN films 24 hours a day. And so I would get, at the time I was a on-air personality for American Crafts has like thousands of SKUs. So they put products all hours of the day. So I would be doing 2 to 3 a.m. ribbon cutter. 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., I'm doing paper trimmer. And that was the cadence of my work at HSN. But that is where I learned how to be on TV and how to be on live TV, because being live on TV, I think, is a lot harder than being scripted, because whatever you say is what you said and no one's taking it back. And you have to get the messaging and you have to get your talking points in. You do not get a second chance. I also, soon after I was working at HSN, was cast for Making It. Has anyone watched Making It? Oh my God. I now believe I'm in the right room. Making It, I could tell you so many funny stories about that show. But for anyone who's unfamiliar, Making It was, and is, I believe, one of the first major network competition shows for makers and crafters. So it's hosted by Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec, who was also married to Karen from Will and Grace. He's a woodworker and a very skilled woodworker. So he brought a very good maker perspective to the show. But they were the hosts. But the premise of the show was I was in season 1, and the show was meant to put, I think there were 6 of us, 6 makers, or maybe 8, through different challenges. And they had we were set up in this beautiful barn that they built for us on a ranch in Los Angeles, which actually was a ranch that used to be owned by Ellen DeGeneres. It was huge. I mean, it had a lake, it had 2 or 3 houses, an extra guest house, in this barn. And Making It, every episode, you were challenged with a new challenge that you had to make, something they gave you and something you had to make. Now, I will tell you a little few secrets about Making It, but it was a great experience. And that was the first time I was doing something that was on a major scale where everyone was watching it. Everyone who was in this world was aware of that show. After Making It aired and wrapped, I got a decent amount of press from that, and that's fine. It was really a show about Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman, with us as the supporting cast. The producer who had worked with me on Home and Family reached out, because that producer was now working at this new channel that was going to come out called Disney Plus. And they needed to populate their network with content. And one of the ways that a lot of networks do that, Disney Plus, Netflix, and Amazon Prime, all of them, is they look to influencers as sources for affordable content, because they're not going to pay the price of a major film star. That's just too expensive. But for less money, you can hire an influencer to host and create a show. So we filmed Disney Family Sundays in 2018, I believe, and aired I don't know if you remember this, but Disney Plus basically came online November before the pandemic. And that kind of changed the scope of Disney Family Sundays, and I think a lot of shows, because filming stopped. So we didn't do any more episodes. But if you go on there now, you will still see Disney Family Sundays. And that was a great opportunity for me that landed me on the cover of Parents with my son. And that was really cool, because the woman who put me there, she had seen me on Making It, and she said, "I'm so excited when you won Making It." I said, "Girl, I did not win that show. I did not win at all." It taught me that it really doesn't matter what happened on me. It was the impact that I had by being there. And people remembered me from that show, and she invited me. I don't know, had she thought, if you remembered I lost, if she would have ever done this, if we would ever have done this. And so, having done, especially television, it's opened up this conversation through my social media that had not previously been there. People were interacting with me, but it really did turn what I was doing into a conversation with the people who were following me, because people wanted to interact. They wanted to message. It became a conversation. And a quote that kind of encapsulates this is the idea that social media is a dialogue and not a monologue. It's not us talking at people. It's us talking with people. Now, I do have to tell you a funny thing about the Parents Magazine cover that you just would never know if I didn't get the chance to tell you. This photo, which you can, if you stare at it long enough, you can tell, we are not even in the same place at the same time. Because remember Marcus, who says, "Yucky poo poo you"? Do you think he's a good model for magazine cover? He is not. I told them when they reached out, I said, "Does Big parents magazine require showing them a parent? Because if it does, my child is not cooperative. He doesn't want to be in front of the camera. It's fine. He doesn't have to. But they were like, yeah, you have a parent on the Parents magazine cover. So I was actually sitting in hair and makeup while he is out there being filmed. This is another photo from that photo shoot. And what you can't see, so this woman in the top corner, her title, her career title is child handler. I'm not kidding you. She shows up like Mary Poppins to the set of movies, commercials, magazine covers with a bag of tricks. And her job is to keep that kid happy and do whatever they need to be cooperative for that photo shoot. So it was not up to me as the mom to make him cooperate. It was up to her to figure it out. She played Legos with him. She did like puppet shows with him. And what you cannot see in this photo, maybe yeah, he is feeding him a lollipop while he is standing there meaning to take this photo. She will do anything, and she's sticking a lollipop in his mouth so that he will stand there for this photo. Fun fact about this magazine cover. So now if you ever happen to see this magazine cover, which by the way, I found this image of the magazine cover on eBay. It is for sale for $3.99 if anybody wants to buy one. Going back to what I said though about social media being a dialogue rather than a monologue. One of my favorite books, and I'm hoping you find nuggets of this presentation that are relevant to you, but one of my favorite books I've been talking about for years, and maybe you've read it, is a book by Donald Miller called Building a Story Brand. It's an awesome book that you can really apply to any part of your life, but especially within business. The idea that storytelling is really what's meaningful. It's not about what you're selling. It's not about the actual thing. It's about how you deliver it. And one of the things he says is a big reason people care about your story is because it informs their story. I'm telling you things about me today that do not resonate exactly with you, but there's going to be pieces of it that feel like it's important or feel like, that feels like something I might take home and use. Also, people don't buy goods and services. They buy relationships and stories, which is why I think the influencer marketing piece is so important, whether it be your career or in your business, because brands come to me because of the fact that I am a relatable story rather than a less relatable brand. So going back to making it, I told you I was going to tell you some secrets. One of the biggest questions I get about that show is, did you guys know what you were making before you made it? I'm going to tell you a secret. We did. So when you're cast on the show, you go through all this very long process of vetting, right? Like you get these, I was looking last night at all the emails. One of them was like, congratulations, you are one of the 100 finalists. And I'm like, how is that congratulations? Because I know you're not casting 100 people, but okay. And then you get another email. It's like, congratulations, you made it to the tryout phase. And congratulations, you made it to the interview phase. So in one of the phases is like you're going to have to make something and show us that you can actually do this. So during that phase, they give you challenges that you don't know at the time are going to actually be for the show, but they are. So they're giving you assignments. You need to do this thing, send us photos of what you've made. And later, once I was cast on the show, I was like, oh, now I know why you had me do that, because now we're going to actually make it for TV. And one of the projects that they sent over for me to do, by the way, the making it, before it was called Making It, was called the Handmade project when it was first developed. They quickly wrapped that on up because of Handmaid's Tale and crafting and sex slavery, very different. So we don't want to confuse those. So they assigned us one project, and I have the email. It says the Handmade project, self-portrait. I think it was self-portrait or handmade quilt. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I needed to send over a sketch of what I was thinking. So we had to create essentially a quilt, but it couldn't be a literal quilt. We were going to have, I think, on the show 13 hours for this project. And while I'm sure lots of you in the pin a rose on your nose could do a quilt in 13 hours, let me tell you what I can't do. Impossible. So I sent over this idea, and I'm looking at it, and it says lace cut wood, quilting squares, and photo transfer wood album. Sounds really ambitious, Amber. I'm not really sure why you suggested that. But this was my idea. I was going to make a quilt that kind of hung and had these squares, but they were going to be wood. And eventually I narrowed it down to being made of paper. And so you can see this is from the set of the show. They had us lined up and had our quilts displayed. And that was mine. It was paper squares that were connected with jump rings, each one, and then hung from a gold dowel with paper tassels on the bottom. Now that was an idea I pitched to them. And the reason I pitched, oh, and here's a closer idea. Like this is what it looks like up close. It had a lot of texture. Each piece was embossed. It was beautiful. But one of the reasons I did this project, and the reason I'm telling you this now is because I have guilt that I never shared it on the show, is that I have a quilt that is from my great aunt. My great aunt, she herself was not an enslaved person. However, her family members were. She was taught to quilt by those people. Her quilts feature many squares that are Underground Railroad squares. So there are messages on many quilts made by enslaved people and their ancestors that are squares that are messages for those who are traveling in attempts to gain freedom. So she actually has her square. One of them is the North Star. It means follow the North Star, but there's many of them. The Smithsonian Institute has a beautiful article about what each of these squares meant. So I have that. And actually, unrelated, if anybody in this room knows how to tell me how to get that quilt made into a coat, I would love to. Her quilt doesn't have any batting on it. It's not completed, but I do have that quilt. So I wanted to, the reason I made this is because within those paper squares, I embedded some of her squares from her quilt. I didn't share it on the show because I was nervous that I was going to get voted off the first episode of the show, and I didn't want to be the one Black girl who got on the show and all she talked about was slavery. That was my big fear. So I never said anything about it. I ended up doing quite well on the show, and I've always wished that I had shared that story because I think there's a lot of people in this room, there's probably a lot of people who know these things about quilts and the stories of quilts, but in the world, there aren't, and I wish I would have shared it. So after making it, that experience informed how I was going to then share my story online. And I've always been aware of the fact that the way that me as a brown woman look different than most of the people who are sharing content in the crafting community. And that's fine. But I did feel like after that making experience and not having shared that story, I was like, I should be a little more vocal, and because there are people who look like me who can relate. So I decided I was going to develop this thing, a manifesto, like a cool little thing that would talk about what I wanted to represent as a content creator. And this really does, even years later, encapsulate just what I think. We get pumped to craft. No, we get seriously pumped. We get really excited about it. Everything goes with everything. Meaning, it don't matter if it matches, does it go? It's fine. We keep it so very real. Instagram is a highlight reel, which means you only get to see about 20% of my life. I'm living 100% of my life. You are crafty. Yes, you, because I really believe that all of us can be better when we just make a little something. It doesn't have to be good. Just try it. Making makes us better because I feel as in my role now as a content creator and influencer, I probably help more people than I did when I was a child psychologist because I think there's something healing about the act of actually making. And then last, oh yeah, vinyl should come in more skin tones. Because at the time, I couldn't find, like if I went to the store and I wanted a beige skin tone vinyl to make a ballerina, there weren't really great options. And this meant more than vinyl. I remember I worked with a paint company at the time. There was a color called, I think it was called nude. I was like, who's nude? Because it depends who's nude and what color it would be, right? And so from that storytelling and speaking honestly, it helped me find the people who are my people. And it also helped me find the people who are not my people, which is fine. Anytime I talk about these things, I always have people who decide to unfollow. And I'm like, great, we agree on something. We agree that I think what I think and you think what you think, and we are so different that maybe we shouldn't hang out. And from that, I was able to develop better storytelling online. I was able to create more projects that felt like they were more conversational, like it could really bring us together. And then I also started making product And though that product had a story with it too, I was creating like mermaids. They can be whatever color you want them to be. So I was creating mermaids that looked like everybody, or paper that had women in hijab on the paper, because guess what? They love crafting too. The paper then turned into fabric with Riley Blake, which I was so excited about because that was a dream I'd always had, was to have paper and fabric that were the same pattern at the same time. And for me, storytelling really allowed me to be more honest, and that honesty turned into me reaching more people who were like, yeah, we're down with this. We're down with what you're doing, and we love crafting. And at the end of the day, my corner of the internet is just a good place to be. Like, there's a lot of ugly in the world, and I would rather be a place that you can count on a smile when you come by. So like I've said, I do not have the largest following by any means, but more followers for me does not mean more dollars. And if you look around, like, that just, the math doesn't math when you think about it. My assistant, she's always, we need something to go viral. I'm like, for why? Because that doesn't matter. Frankly, when you go viral, that's when you start reaching people who maybe you never really meant to reach in the first place. And then you start getting into the weeds of stuff that you never really intended. So for me, where I am is a very good place. It's allowed me to be successful, and it's allowed me to feel impactful. One of the ways that I have taken that following, and this is, you guys, if you're interested, this could be very helpful. One of the ways that has been very helpful in bringing my moderate audience and delivering content to them is an app called ManyChat. And you might have seen this a lot of times especially now on Instagram, you'll see a video, and then at the end it will say comment shop to get the link, or comment whatever. There's lots of apps that do that. ManyChat is one of them. And I just shared these stats with you because I do think that email marketing is very important, and it's going to allow you to reach people directly. But this app for me has really allowed me to reach people in a way that I never could before. To have a 74% click-through rate for something is very high. And that ManyChat basically lets you click, it says, or comment spring for links. And as soon as they comment spring, they are automatically sent a message that gives them the links to the product or the tutorial or whatever it is I need to send them. It's very customizable. And so that's been a way to translate my social following into, whether it be revenue or web views or whatever your end goal might be. So what does all of this look like in real life? There's a few ways that I work with brands, and one of them, I'm going to use a few as examples. One is Joann. I've worked with Joann for years. I'm sure we're all familiar with Joann. And they have more of a traditional influencer program. Their program includes a long-term partnership, so I work with them on a year-long basis. And every month I send them deliverables, and deliverables could be 1 IG video, 3 IG stories, 1 blog post. It could be, you can decide what your deliverables look like. It's up to you. But I do that on a regular basis. And then there's contractual exclusivity. So with those longer term contracts, you are able to usually agree upon exclusivity, which means I can't work with certain other companies. I'm sure you can guess what companies those are. And with that long-term relationship, people look to me and they remember me as a face of Joann. And so when they have questions, I become a reliable, trusted source, right? Because I'm the storyteller, I'm the relatable person, versus Joann, which is the big brand, big box company. So a good example of this is this wreath. Honey, this wreath. So I made this wreath 1 or 2 years ago for Christmas. It is using the loopy yarn, which is that finger knitting yarn that you can get. And I wanted to come up with a way to use it that didn't require finger knitting. Because a lot of what I try to do is make content that is very relatable, that anyone could do. You do not have to have a crafting background to make it. And this is just taking that loopy yarn and wrapping it around a wreath form, adding a bow and some felt balls. Very easy. So easy that it actually sold out the yarn at Joann, and no one can get green yarn. So it went a bit viral to the point where people were telling me that they would go to Joann and they'd be pushing their cart. They'd have the yarn, they'd have the wreath form, they'd have and the felt balls in their basket, and then they'd meet somebody else walking down the aisle with the yarn, the wreath, and the balls, and they'd look at each other and be like, "You're making the wreath?" They're like, "Yeah, I'm making the wreath." So that wreath went a little bit bananas, which is great, right? This is with a traditional program like Joann, I have the opportunity to always be creating content, and you just never know what's going to catch fire. This caught fire. So much so that wreath turned into a Santa Claus wreath. Because they're like, what other things can you make with that yarn and a wreath? I can make a Santa Claus wreath. Great. I can also make a reindeer wreath. I can also make a snowman wreath. Because people were like, I don't celebrate Christmas. What else? I'm like, hold my beer. I got you. That was, do we make a heart? Absolutely, we can make a heart. Yes, we can make a heart. Then summer comes around and Joann's, what else can you do? I'm like, girl, I'm thinking about a wreath. No, I was not. You can cut a wreath and wrap it in 2 separate pieces and turn it into a watermelon. I don't know if anybody actually did this one, but now we're running out of ideas. The poor guy is getting rough now. Now we're making a sun wreath, which I was like, let's put some ribbon on it and make it like a rainbow. We're really running out of ideas. I think like right now, I love this one. It was like a cone with the wreath around it, and you made it like a witch hat. And so at this point, I was like, I think I'm out of wreath ideas. No, you're not. No, you're not, Amber. You're not out of wreath ideas because we can stop making wreaths, and what we can do is just make an entire Christmas tree out of it. And we used tomato and wrapped it around and around. But this is just one product. It is loopy yarn, whether you buy one roll, one skein, or 5. You can make all of these items. And it was great for Joann because as a long-term partner, we caught fire on that first traditional wreath. And we're like, okay, let's keep doing it again and again. And every time, because I'm working with Joann on a long-term partnership, it ties back to Joann. So had this been a one-off thing, Joann may not have reaped those benefits of this piece of content. But because we were working together for a long time, this really was like, if you're going to get your loopy yarn, go to Joann to get your loopy yarn. And I kept telling that story over and over again. Another piece of that puzzle is the idea that it comes across as a lot more genuine. Like I actually do shop at Joann. I'm there all the time. And no one's questioning me like, are you just telling me to go to Joann because they're paying you to tell me you go to Joann? I'm like, yes and no. Like they are paying me, but if you do want to get your yarn, go to Joann. You don't have to, but that's what I would recommend. These are proof that the loopy yarn craze was a thing. And I have lots more. I just couldn't fit them on the screen of people making their own versions of them, which this is really like where the proof is. It's so great when you see people taking your project and recreating it and sharing it themselves. Another model of how I've worked with companies and brands is UGC marketing. And that means user generated. And that is a lot less expensive. Basically means that they're going to approach me to create the content. I don't ever share it on my own channel. They use it for their own channels. And it's great if you are struggling to just populate your channels with content. You can hire influencers and content creators to do that for you and then just share it to your own channel. It's cheaper because you are not paying them to access their audience. You are simply paying them for the asset, and then you will do with that what you wish. Now you get in the weeds with how long you get to use it and all that, but it is a less expensive option. Another one that I've done that with is Stitch Fix. And the nice thing about it here is that you can take a trend because influencers are going to be able to turn around something much quicker than brands usually can because there's just that ladder you have to go up to get stuff approved. But if you see a trend, in this case, the burr basket that was hugely popular on TikTok, Stitch Fix reached out and say, hey, can you do something similar to that? Can we have it next week? Sure. And so I created a Christmas Stitch burr box idea for them, and they used that on their channel. I never shared it on my own channel. Other ways of working with brands, and I'll go through this quickly because I do want to leave time for questions, is gifting. And really the message here is if you're going to go that route, I would be mindful of how that message is sent. Generally, I get messages like this where they're asking to send me something. We'd love to send this to you. There's no obligation for you to share. We just love to get it in your hand. And usually I'm more likely to actually share that thing if that is the message I've received. Alternatively, I'll skip this one. This company reached out and said, hey, we're going to send you this thing. Here's what you need to do in exchange for it. That doesn't feel so great, especially because I don't have an existing relationship with you. If you're going to say, hey, I'm going to send you this XYZ, and in exchange, you need to do this and this, probably not, because I did check with my landlord and I love craft supplies, but my mortgage lender is no longer accepting stickers. So I do think there are ways for you to have that happen. For example, if you want to look and see who's using your content or your product organically already, reach out to them and say, hey, we'd love to send you a little bit more so that you could post it on your next project because you know they're using it already. So we'd love to send you a little bit more so that you can have fun with it. But those are just some suggestions for how, if you're considering how influencer relationships might work for you, those are some suggestions for what that might look like. And so to close, I did want to go back to one piece that quote I mentioned earlier that I think is a good thing, whether you're looking at this as a career or as a business, that social media is a dialogue, not a monologue. And it's something that some people don't understand. It's more like a telephone than a television. And no matter how you're looking to use influencer marketing in your business, I do think that is something that can be very informative for how you move forward. So thank you so much for letting me come up here and talk at you for this time. I would love to. I have a few more minutes. So if you do have questions, I'm happy to take them. I think they've got a mic floating around. So raise your hands and I'll answer them. We got our first question here.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Tony. Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
I know.
So, question, you do so much. You've got a family, and I'm sure you've got a lot of personal things that you love to do. How do you manage your energy and your boundaries around a business that's grown so much?
How do I manage my boundaries? And I think I've done this for a long enough so I know that when to turn it off and like when to just take a minute. I think the hardest part for me was back when I was doing a lot of television and a lot of travel. Everything felt like it had to be a yes. Every opportunity felt like it had to be a yes. And I've learned that every opportunity does not have to be a yes. It is. I was just thinking today about some times that I've said no, and I'm so glad I did. And I don't, the dollar figure does not amount to how I'm going to decide about something. I've separated myself from that. I'm very fortunate, and my family, we're going to be fine. I do not have to say yes to everything. And if that means that we budget a little bit differently, then that's fine, because my peace of mind and my sanity are just too important. So I do say no a lot more now than I used to. And I think that's probably my biggest boundary that I've learned to enact.
Hi, I'm Shannon.
Hi.
And when I watch your Instagram videos, you are so natural, authentic, and funny. And I am not. So, please, maybe a couple things that you could suggest that would get me over that hump, and do videos that are a little bit more like.
I would actually tell you, don't be exactly who you are. Like, be exactly who you are. Because yes, I get on the camera and I'm funny and I'm loud and I tell stories, but not everybody's into that. I'm not for everyone. Yeah, for myself someday. Be that, and that is fine. Like, I look at videos sometimes, she's so calm and even. That is so nice. I'm not that. So who you are, because there are people who want that and people who appreciate that and people who love that and want to see more of it. There cannot be a lot of this because that's too much. It's too much. It's too much. I don't want to see that. So I would say take what you can from what you in other people as the little nuggets of things. Maybe you see me and you're like, oh, the way she starts her videos makes a lot of sense. She starts her videos every time with, and I'll tell you, I start every single video with footage of how it ended, footage of how the project finished. So maybe you take that. But as far as like personality and delivery and all that, I would try to separate from that because it's not as important as you think. Anyone else? Yes.
The Wreath gig. So the pictures are so cute, and looking at your Instagram feed, they're also like, oh, do you do your own photography for your Instagram and for those pictures for Joanne's and stuff, or do you have a professional?
Yes. The photos that you see are photos that I've taken myself. They are photos that have been taken for me by my assistant, or they also may be photos that have been taken by like a professional photographer, videographer. The ones that I've taken myself are the most tricky, but it's not that hard. I use a Canon DSLR camera and an app that goes with it called Canon Connect, whereby you can use your phone as a monitor. And I set up the camera where I want to be. I can look I can look on my phone, see where I'm positioned, and literally there's a button for the shutter on the phone, and you just tap it and it will take the photo for you. When I do the photos myself, I always set the camera to like a rapid fire photo, so that it's going to take, every time I press it, it's going to take 10 photos. That way I get past the part where I'm looking at the thing and I'm looking up. So you get a few options, but it's very possible to do these. I did it by myself for a very long time. It's very possible to do that. It's easier if you have someone else, but both are feasible. One more.
I have a pretty large social media following, about 350,000 across all my platforms. And I keep waiting for an agency to find me because I think I'm amazing. They haven't found me yet. So how did they find you, or did you find them?
That's a great question. There's lots of agencies out there. My agency, to be honest, my agency found me on the recommendation of someone else. And I didn't get any attention from anyone until I was on television. And I don't think television is a necessary component anymore. But for me, once I was on Disney and once I was on Making It, it was like, finally people believed me and they were willing to take a meeting. So my agency found me because a friend recommended them. So if you know anyone else who's represented by an agency that you'd like to get in with, I would literally just send them an email or have them connect you via email to ask about representation. Yeah.
Hi.
With the social media being a conversation, how do you manage that? How do you make it a conversation without having it take over 3 hours of your day?
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you asked that. I think the way I think about it, because yes, you cannot answer every DM, you cannot answer and you certainly can't be super thoughtful about every response, because then you really would be doing this all day. I try to think of the dialogue piece more about how I'm making content, especially in the crafting world, because so much of what we do is teaching someone how to do something. It's like tutorial based, which doesn't have a lot of messaging in it, like storytelling. So I do try to find ways from time to create, but also tell a story with it. And that's where the dialogue comes in, because that's when you really get people talking in your comments about it. And really part is when people start talking to each other and you're like not even in on it. So I often try to think, yeah, we're going to show you how to make this wreath. What's a story I could tell you about this wreath, right? Like with the snowman, like a lot of times Hanukkah just gets looked over and people are not making projects, but you can absolutely do this. And something just as simple as that starts a conversation. So trying to build in storytelling in the actual content itself, rather than having to manage comments or things like that.
Hi. So since so many of us are building our lives around being creative, do you have tips for when you have those creativity blocks?
Yes. My two biggest pieces of advice. One, if you have a block, just let it ride. You'll be back. It'll be fine. The more, for me at least, the more I try to like harp on it, the worse it gets. But something a friend told me, do you guys know Anna Griffin? She's like the card maker. She has a card maker business. She told me something years ago that always stuck with me. She said, when you are excited about something, do that right now. Even if you have other irons in the fire, once you get excited about something, and maybe that's my ADHD speaking, because then I have a million things going on. But when you're excited about something, dive into it, because that will inspire more little things to come from it. And at work, whenever I have an idea that comes up, I'm like, let's just do it right now with what we have, because I'm excited about it and I can deliver that excitement. And that usually keeps me going. Yeah. All right. I think everybody, thank you guys so much. This was fun.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode of H plus H Connect. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Amber Kemp Gerstel for sharing her incredible journey, insights, and inspiration with us. It's been truly enlightening to hear about the challenges and triumphs of being a creative influencer, and how influencer marketing can play a pivotal role in business growth. Amber's story reminds us of the power of creativity, resilience, and the importance of adapting to new opportunities. Her experiences, from dealing with social media hacks to navigating the world of influencer partnerships, offer valuable lessons for all of us. I hope you found today's episode as inspiring and informative as I did. If you have any questions or would like to share your thoughts, feel free to reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners and engaging with our creative community. Don't forget to subscribe to H plus H Connect to stay updated on future episodes filled with more insights and stories to enhance your business and creativity. You can also follow us on social media for the latest updates and behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Darren Stern, and I look forward to joining you on our next episode of H plus H Connect. Until then, keep creating and stay inspired. Goodbye, everyone, and have a wonderful day.